Imagine for a moment that you have achieved the ultimate financial dream. You have savings, real savings. You didn't trust the stock market and you didn't trust the banks, so you converted your life's work into physical gold. You hold it in your hand, heavy, cold, permanent. You sleep soundly at night because you know a simple truth. Governments can fall, currencies can collapse, but this metal in your safe will always be money. It is your property. Now wake up. It is April 5th, 1933. You turn on the radio and hear the news that turns your safety into a felony. The President of the United States has just declared war, not on a foreign enemy, but on your savings. The decree is absolute. Keeping that gold in your home is now a crime against the state. You are legally required to surrender it, and if you refuse, if you try to hide it, the government threatens you with a $10,000 fine and 10 years in federal prison. Let that sink in. A $250,000 fine in today's money, 10 years behind bars. This wasn't a story from Stalin's Russia or Nazi Germany. This happened in the land of the free. The United States government executed the largest armed confiscation of wealth in history, turning millions of law-abiding savers into criminals overnight. To understand how a free people allowed this to happen, and to understand the great heist that followed, we have to look at the world they lived in. We need to understand the old laws of money. The money in your pocket today is fiat. It is paper-backed by nothing but faith. If you take a $20 bill to the Treasury today and ask for value, they will just give you two $10 bills. But in 1933, the United States was on the gold standard. This meant that paper money wasn't money itself. It was a warehouse receipt. Look at the text on a 1928 bill. Redeemable in gold coin payable to the bearer on demand. This was a contract. It meant you could walk into any bank, slap a piece of paper on the counter, and the teller bade to hand you physical gold. This system was the ultimate check and balance. It was designed to keep the government honest. Politicians couldn't just print endless amounts of cash to fund wars or buy votes because for every paper dollar in circulation, there had to be physical gold in the vault to back it up. The people held the leash, and the government wore the collar. These were gold handcuffs. But then, the system broke. Following the crash of 1929, the Great Depression didn't just hurt the economy, it obliterated it. By early 1933, the country was unrecognizable. Factories were silent. Bread lines stretched for blocks. And then came the most dangerous emotion of all, fear. Rumors started spreading that the banks didn't have the gold. People realized that if everyone tried to cash in their warehouse receipts at once, the vaults would be empty. So the American people did the only rational thing. They ran. It started as a trickle, then became a flood. Millions of Americans rushed to their banks to withdraw their savings in gold coins. They took the gold home and buried it in backyards, hid it under floorboards, and stuffed it into coffee cans. For the individual family, this was survival, but for the banking system, it was a death sentence. Think of the economy as a living body, and gold as the blood. When people hoarded gold, they were draining the blood from the system. Without gold in the vaults, banks couldn't issue paper money. They couldn't lend to farmers. They couldn't pay payrolls. The commercial heart of America stopped beating. The machinery of capitalism seized up. The country was on the brink of anarchy. The people were holding the gold, the government was broke, and the system was dead. The stage was set for a new leader to step in, someone who was willing to break all the rules to restart the engine. Enter Franklin Delano Roosevelt, March 4th, 1933. When he placed his hand on the Bible to take the oath of office, he wasn't just taking over a country, he was taking over a disaster zone. The banking system had collapsed so completely that on his very first morning, 32 states had already closed their banks indefinitely. FDR had a plan. He needed to flood the economy with cash to fund massive relief programs, build dams, and create jobs. He needed to restart the stopped heart of American commerce, but he couldn't. His hands were tied by those gold handcuffs. Under the law, the Federal Reserve couldn't print a single dollar unless it had 40 cents of gold backing it in the vault, and the vaults were emptying out because the people were holding the gold. FDR faced a brutal choice: keep the system honest and watch the nation starve, or violate the sacred rights of private property to seize the gold and reset the board. He chose the latter. He didn't ask Congress. He didn't ask the people. He used a wartime statute from World War I to declare a domestic emergency. On April 5th, 1933, the order was signed. Executive Order 6102. The language was precise and cold. All monetary gold now belongs to the government. Private citizens were given a strict deadline. You were allowed to keep a small amount, $100 worth, roughly 5 ounces, for customary use. Everything else? It had to be turned into the Federal Reserve. To make this work, the government launched a psychological war. They rebranded saving. If you held onto your gold to protect your family's future, you were no longer a prudent citizen. The government labeled you a hoarder. Newspapers ran stories implying that people keeping gold were traitors, stalling the recovery, enemies of the working man. The message was clear: turn in your gold to save America. And just in case patriotism wasn't enough, they added a weapon to the deal. The penalty for noncompliance was draconian. If you were caught with unregistered gold after May 1st, you faced a $10,000 fine and 10 years in federal prison. Think about that. 10 years in a cage, not for robbery, not for murder, but for the crime of holding the same money the Founding Fathers wrote into the Constitution. It worked. Most Americans were law-abiding people. They were scared of the fines, and they trusted their president. Millions of ounces of gold, wedding gifts, inheritances, life savings, flowed out of private hands and into the government's deep vaults. In exchange, the tellers handed them paper bills. The official rate, $20.67 per ounce. People walked away feeling like they had done their duty. But they didn't know they had just been the victims of the greatest insider trading scheme in history. Here is the twist. This is the moment the rescue plan reveals itself as a heist. Why did FDR need the physical gold? Why not just print paper? Watch the magic trick. Throughout 1933, the government collected the gold at that cheap price, $20.67. Then, once the gold was safely locked away in Fort Knox and out of your hands, Congress passed the Gold Reserve Act of 1934. Immediately after, FDR issued a proclamation revaluing gold to $35 an ounce. Do the math. The government forced you to sell your asset for $20, and then, with the stroke of a pen, declared it was worth $35. The government pocketed the difference, a profit of nearly 70% on the entire national stockpile. That profit amounted to nearly $3 billion in 1934 money, a massive windfall used to fund the New Deal. But where did that profit come from? It came from you. By raising the price of gold, they effectively slashed the value of the paper dollar they had just given you. Your paper money lost 40% of its purchasing power virtually overnight. It was a massive hidden tax that no one voted for. Instead of raising income taxes, which causes riots, they simply changed the definitions. The result was simple. The state got richer, the people got poorer, and the link between the American citizen and honest money was severed forever. So the heist was complete. The people had been tricked and their wealth had been devalued. The question is, did everyone just roll over and accept it? Did the land of the free simply surrender without a fight? Not quite. One man stood up. His name was Frederick Barber Campbell. He wasn't a politician. He was a Manhattan lawyer, sharp, principled, and utterly fearless. He had 27 bars of gold stored at Chase National Bank. When the deadline passed, the bank tried to follow orders and hand his gold over to the feds. Campbell blocked the door. He sued the bank. His argument was simple, logical, and based on the supreme law of the land. The executive branch cannot seize private property without due process. You cannot take what is mine just because the president signed a piece of paper. The government panicked. If Campbell won, the entire confiscation scheme would collapse. So they didn't just argue with him, they came for him. A federal grand jury indicted Campbell. They wanted to make an example of him. They wanted to show the public that fighting the New Deal would land you in a cell. But the legal battle went deeper than just one man's gold bars. It touched the very foundation of American business, the gold clause. For decades, investors and corporations didn't trust paper money. They knew politicians liked to print cash and cause inflation, so they protected themselves. Almost every major contract, mortgages, railroad bonds, government debts, contained a gold clause. This was a legal promise. It said, no matter what happens to the paper dollar, you must pay me back in the equivalent value of gold. It was the ultimate insurance policy against government incompetence. If these contracts stood, FDR's plan to devalue the dollar would fail. The government and corporations would go bankrupt, paying off debts in expensive gold. So Congress did the unthinkable. They passed a joint resolution essentially saying, we know we signed a contract. We know we promised gold. We lied. They retroactively outlawed the gold clauses. They told bondholders, take the devalued paper or get nothing. It was a breach of contract on a national scale. It was theft legalized by statute. And inevitably, it went to the Supreme Court. The year was 1935. The case was Perry versus United States. The atmosphere inside the court was electric. The Attorney General actually warned the judges that ruling against the government would plunge the nation into chaos. The justices were torn. On one side, the clear text of the Constitution. On the other, the pressure of a terrifying economic crisis. The decision came down. It was a razor-thin margin, 5-4. By a single vote, the Supreme Court sided with the government. But the ruling was bizarre. The majority opinion essentially admitted the government was wrong. They said, yes, the government is breaking its word. Yes, this is immoral. But then they concluded, but the crisis is too big. The damage is already done. We cannot turn back the clock. They ruled that the government's need to survive outweighed the citizens' right to their property. The dissenters in the court were furious. They watched the Constitution being shredded in real time. Justice James McReynolds, an old-school constitutionalist, was so disgusted by the decision that he refused to even read his written dissent. He couldn't bear to look at his colleagues. Witnesses say his face turned crimson. His voice trembled with rage. He threw his papers down on the bench and delivered an extemporaneous speech that echoed through history. "The Constitution is gone," he declared. "This is Nero at his worst. The guarantees of the Constitution are being swept away. Shame and humiliation are upon us." McReynolds knew what had just happened. It wasn't just about gold. It was a precedent. On that day, the Supreme Court decided that in times of crisis, the government's power is absolute, and your property rights are conditional. The gold was gone. The dollar was redefined. And the old republic was dead. Justice McReynolds was right. The Constitution wasn't just wounded. It was changed forever. He knew the truth that most people missed. The moment the link between the dollar and gold was severed, the government gained absolute godlike control over value. Before 1933, money was property. It was yours. After 1933, money became credit. It became a promise from politicians. And as history shows, politicians break promises. Why does a history lesson from 1933 matter to you right now? Because that was the moment the door locked behind you. The process that FDR began, Richard Nixon finished. In 1971, Nixon went on television and cut the dollar from gold completely. He called it temporary. It's been over 50 years. Today, look at the bill in your wallet. It says legal tender. It has value only because the government says it does. This brings us to the modern, terrifying reality. In 1933, the government had to physically send agents to seize gold. It was messy. It was visible. It made people angry. Today, they have perfected the theft. They don't need to come to your house. They don't need to crack your safe. They simply print $1 trillion. When they flood the system with new money, the value of your savings dilutes. It is the exact same confiscation as 1933. But now it is invisible. Inflation is just Executive Order 6102 in slow motion. They aren't taking your money. They are stealing your purchasing power. They are stealing your time. History is a wheel. The methods change, but the mechanism remains. In 1933, they came for the metal. In the future, they will come for the code. We are moving rapidly towards central bank digital currencies. They call it convenient. You should call it programmable money. In 1933, you could at least hide your gold in the garden. In a digital currency world, there is no garden. Every single transaction is tracked, recorded, and approved by a central ledger. Imagine a system where they don't need a courtroom or an executive order to seize your wealth. If policy dictates that the economy is too slow, they can apply negative interest rates, and your balance shrinks automatically to force you to spend. If you spend money on the wrong things, too much carbon, the wrong political donation, the wrong books, the transaction can simply be blocked. It is the ultimate control. The lesson of 1933 isn't just that gold is good and paper is bad. The lesson is about sovereignty. As long as your wealth sits inside a system controlled entirely by someone else, you are not the owner. You are just a user. You are a tenant in your own bank account. So the question isn't whether a confiscation can happen again. The math says it must. The question is, what form will it take next time? And when the decree comes down, will you be the one standing in line, trusting the plan, ready to hand over your freedom? Or will you be the one who read the history books, saw the trap coming and prepared? The choice, for now, is still yours.